Hello and welcome to the Probe Dental Podcast. Today we're joined by a familiar guest in Paul Graham, Managing Director of Medical at Christie & Co. And he's here to discuss the 2025 Christie & Co. Dental Market Review. Paul, it's been a while since we've had you on. How have you been?
I'm good, thank you, James. Thanks for having me on. Yes, it has been a while. A lot has changed in that time as well.
Excellent. Well, obviously we're here to just discuss the review. There was a lot to kind of sink your teeth into, pun not intended, this year. Starting with the introduction, it kind of notes a strategic recalibration in 2024. Independent owners are leading the market. Have you also highlighted the re-entry of corporate and group buyers in the first half of the year of 2025? What are the most significant implications of this rebalancing between independent and corporate buyers and their appetites for practice owners who are perhaps considering an exit?
Yeah, James, absolutely. I always feel it's probably worthwhile giving a bit of context into the timeline leading up until this point. We saw the trends post-pandemic really make the market um, flourish with activity. I think there'd been a significant increase in appetite from independent buyers at the time, but mainly corporates. Corporates were very, very aggressive during that time. They were building and bolstering their portfolios. The majority of sales that we were handling at that time, you tend to find there was 5 or 6 different bids from corporate operators on a single site. They were still fairly set in the criteria and what they wanted to buy. It had to be a practice of certain quality and scale. But the one thing you could guarantee almost is that there would be a lot of competition. Um, there was then that kind of really difficult point, Trussonomics late 2022, that just started to all of a sudden reset the market. We were kind of navel gazing at that time, looking at certain deals, seeing them renegotiated. The multiples that were once offered for the business for sale was just starting to erode. The performance of some of those businesses were in decline as well. And it was having a real kind of knock on effect to the aggregate values that were being achieved. I would say that was really felt in 2023, where the corporates effectively vacated the market. The stronghold really came from independent buyers. What we saw with independent buyers during that time is whilst they were outpriced of the market in the years prior, where they weren't able to compete with corporate bids, they were coming back in force. There was a real resurgence of independent buyers. That definitely stabilized over 2024. Majority of deals that we dealt with, some 80+% of deals were sold to independent buyers. So great to see. But there was definitely a moment where we wanted to see a little bit more appetite coming back from the corporates, because corporates were generally acquisitive and keen to acquire a site that was of certain size and scale, as I mentioned, and typically that holds a higher value. And there's some independents that have their ceiling height on what they can afford to purchase, whereas corporates have more funds. You know, they're private equity backed. They have the ability to be able to push the boundary on what they're buying on, say, a £5 million site or a £10 million portfolio or greater. And that's where there's a real place for corporate activity. But to come to the question, as of today, where we've started to now see a bit of a entry again from corporates, it's well placed, it's well timed, because I think operators of those larger sites that typically hold a higher value are now looking at their exit strategy more than ever before. They were probably focusing on their businesses 2 3 years ago during that time, whilst corporates were effectively out of the market. But now those conversations are coming to the forefront, and it's nice to see that the appetite from those capable buyers are now matching that, which hopefully should make for a pleasant market in terms of mergers and acquisitions and deals being done for the remainder of this year and into next year.
Brilliant. That all sounds very positive. So the report states that private practices have seen a strengthening in valuation multiples, driven by sustained demand and shifting buyer preference. In contrast, it notes that multiples for NHS and mixed practices are softening. What key factors do you believe are driving those trends, and do you expect them to continue throughout the rest of this year and into next?
I do. I think when we look purely at private practices just now, they are commanding the highest EBITDA multiples. That is typically because the types of businesses produce higher profit margins. There's more pricing autonomy. Um, the buyer preference is very much leaning towards private dentistry. There's maybe a hybrid there with truly mixed practices, NHS and private together. There's still some operational constraints there for the NHS element, but if those businesses are well positioned and operated in the correct way, perhaps with therapy-led models, etc., a well-located, well-performing, truly mixed practice very much has a premium attached to it as well. Where there's a lot of sensitivity and scrutiny is on a fully NHS practice. There's still some amazing fully NHS practices performing and ultimately delivering on their contracts. But I would say that's probably exception to the rule. I think there's a lot of those practices that are feeling the pain of profit margins eroding, difficulty in recruitment, and just a continuation of policy changes, and ultimately looking at their counterparts and competition in neighbouring towns, cities, etc., and probably thinking, am I going to jump to become fully private or diversify and become a mixed practice? I think there's very few that sit solely in the 100% NHS camp just now.
Yeah, no, I think from everything we read here as well, I mean, I'd say that's a pretty safe bet. I mean, the survey data as well in the report indicates that a majority of dental professionals feel that the NHS dentistry recovery plan hasn't really sort of improved delivery. Given that sentiment, what is your perspective on the long-term outlook for NHS dentistry and the government's 10-year plan for the NHS?
Sentiment, I would say, still remains cautious. From the dental market review, we have had approximately 58% of respondents believe that the recovery plan hasn't improved delivery. It's kind of quite a sad indictment. So I think the 10-year plan has promise, but execution gaps really persist. We're going to have to see we're going to have to see that change happen. I think there's a bit of fatigue kicking in. I think there's a bit I think there's some cynicism in there as well. I think there's the sentiment of contract reform and deliverability that's been kind of rumbling on since the contract effectively came into force in 2006. I don't think that is going to change as much as I'd like to see it change. I think that that is here to stay, and for as long as that exists, unless there's a complete turnaround and transformation, I think we're always going to see this element of private dentistry taking the headlines, the positive headlines.
Absolutely. The report also, the dental market review emphasises that for most sellers, buyers continue to value well-governed, profitable businesses with a consistent, I always say this wrong, but EBITDA?
EBITDA, yes.
EBID.
An acronym for earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization.
That is the one. So buyers continue to value well-governed, profitable business with a constant EBITDA and clear growth trajectories. For a practice owner who might be considering a sale in the near future, what are the top 3 operational or strategic areas they should focus on to prepare their business to maximise its value?
Yeah, it's so important just now. It's vital to afford as much time to the process as possible. I would say practice owners who, knock our door and say, look, I'm keen to sell. I want out in 6 months' time. Yes, it's achievable. It's far from ideal. I think the best processes that we run is when a practice owner tells us 3, 4, sometimes 5 years prior, these are my proposed plans. How can Christie and Co help me? And that way the practice owner gets to know us, we get to know them, we can identify the good parts of the business, we can identify parts of the operation that needs to be fixed, adjusted, questioned, scrutinized a bit. And ultimately, when we're then running a process, having that knowledge of the business, being under the skin of the business, will put us in a very good position when we're dealing with hopefully a multiple range of different buyers, and buyers come in various forms. And I think the one thing that is consistent amongst buyers just now is that they are scrutinizing a purchase more than ever before. So affording time is definitely a number one priority. I think for the practice in question, building and retaining a stable team is vital. Having the autonomy in a practice is important, but a principal who is delivering dentistry, doing PR, doing marketing, doing compliance, um, these things now need to be delegated, and I think having a team in place there that supports the principal, and the principal effectively starting to extract him or herself away from the business to a degree, almost making the practice more self-sufficient, and ultimately it can be managed on the basis that the principal, if he or she left after the sale, the continuation of the business will still be well performing. That's easier said than done, because I know practice owners are the living heartbeat of the business. But I think if there is an opportunity to really empower the team around you and support the whole operation, that I think that will be a great tick point for many buyers. The last point, I think more than ever before, I've used the word scrutiny a few times now, strengthen the financial and operational transparency. Data is absolutely crucial. Now, it kind of goes beyond just having financial statements and year-end accounts. Knowing how the business is performing on a weekly, monthly basis, seeing how the individuals and the clinicians perform, all of these things are vital. I think having that kind of key data on patients, on returning patients, their carve up of how income is achieved. Is it NHS? Is it private? What's reoccurring? Those are all kind of key points when we're offering a business for sale that a buyer wants to take confidence in. So yeah, those I would say those are the three main priorities I would give to a potential seller at this moment in time.
I think that's extremely helpful. And we wanted to kind of wrap things up by discussing how the review mentions that obviously recruitment difficulties continue to constrain operational capacity, especially of some NHS-led practices. You also noted how buyers' demand is increasingly focused on practices with stable teams. Obviously, you kind of touched on that just then in the kind of preparation for practice owners looking to sell. How can practice owners address kind of ongoing recruitment and retention challenges, not only to improve their day-to-day operations, but also to enhance that marketability and the value of their practice?
Recruitment remains a critical barrier, especially for the NHS-led practices. I think retention tends to be kind of more deliverable, a bit more robust in private practices. But just taking dentistry as a whole without categorising it across NHS mixed or private, I would say what's important is focusing on and creating a strong employer brand, the ethos that sits within the business, within the practice. Offering career growth is important, and that goes beyond clinicians. It's kind of right down to reception staff and uh, when you look at nursing-led staff, who wants to progress their careers, I think is very important. So having a pathway for all of the team is important. Investment, again, easier said than done. It brings a financial burden to many practices. But the integration of digital tools, AI now, it can be used as a bit of a buzzword, but I think we are seeing some amazing practices that are now investing quite heavily in that part of dentistry. And those clinicians and staff at the front line who are kind of keen to find a career that one allows them to be the best clinician or nurse possible, but also allows them to use the best technology and it's an enjoyable part of the job. I think that's something that many practice owners probably have to move with the times a little bit as well. I think if you don't, there's a clinician or a nurse that's comparing your practice to another practice that has been heavily invested in. So I think it's always important to move forward.
Absolutely. So I think the key takeaway, I guess, from almost everything is, I guess, to be transparent, keep things competitive, and to plan ahead.
Absolutely, James. I think that's all these things kind of at times sound a little bit simplistic. They are harder done and executed than ever before. But I think with the right support, with a good management team, with advisors surrounding the clinician, they don't have to go at it alone. They can lean on the expertise of others to help support that growth of the business.
Excellent. Well, what we'll do is we'll link to the full review. It's very worth anybody watching or listening checking out. We've very much scraped the tip of the iceberg with this conversation. There's a lot to read. Very well worth your time. So we'll link to that in the episode description. But Paul, is there anything else you'd like to say in terms of where people can find out more about Christie & Co. or contact yourselves?
Yeah, certainly. The main section on our website at christie.com will highlight our dental market review. It's a review that we've been doing for over 10 years now, so it's also good to look back in the archives and see how the changing dynamics have made the market move on quite considerably over that time, and ultimately a good barometer for practice owners or those who are looking to buy a practice. Perhaps identify, am I looking at something that is more replicated in 2018, or am I kind of looking at something that's representative of today's market? All of the reports will hopefully be able to give that insight for anyone who's looking to know more.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us as always, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Thanks, James. Thanks very much.